Lynn, you'll have to stand by in case some more people join us a little late. Okay, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to introduce our special guest tonight, Ted Buehner. Ted retired from the National Weather Service in 2018 after 40 years of service. And with that, he's got the rest of his resume on his presentation. So go ahead, Ted.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for having me here tonight. Just to kind of touch bases on what I've been doing since I hung up my anemometer at the National Weather Service roughly 4 years ago now. I'm also an instructor with the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center. And we need somebody to mute. Thanks, Clyde. And I also work at part-time at the two Everett radio stations, Classic Country KXA and KRKO, Everett's Greatest Hits. I do mainly traffic and weather, which I was doing on the morning shows this morning. But I also do Weather Minute podcasts. So you're welcome to jot that web address down. I just put up a fresh one here this afternoon addressing a listener's question on what is the driest location in the North Sound? So by North Sound, we're talking Snohomish, Skagit, and Island counties. Also do some reporting. So I'll have occasional news stories on EverettPost.com. Plus, during the high school football season, I'm out at a football field doing some reporting from those locations live on KRKO as well. I'm also the chair of the Washington State Emergency Communications Committee. I've been on that committee since 1996. And if you're not familiar with this communications committee, I think you're very familiar with the emergency alert system and wireless emergency alerts, those things that pop up on your smartphone. We are the ones that help manage both of those programs and more across the entire state of Washington. I'm also now the chair of the Partners in Emergency Preparedness Conference. I put the website up there so that you can jot it down. We just had our latest conference in April of this year. We're now starting to ramp up for our 2023 conference. And I've been on the conference committee since 1997. So you can see I'm still being rather active, not only in the weather community, but working with the emergency management community as well. Also a consultant, work with various groups, also with I have an LLC, Tornado Ted Weather. And I also volunteer, for instance, the Emergency Management Group of Washington. We just finished Seafair over here in the Seattle area. I was the staff meteorologist in the Emergency Operations Center for that. It is fun to brief the air show participants each morning, and that includes the Blue Angels. So it's quite a thrill to be able to do that year after year. Also volunteer with the Red Cross, primarily in my amateur radio role, and also with Snohomish County Emergency Management. I come in there for exercises as a meteorologist and also with the ACS group. One thing I didn't include on here, this is my 45th season as a baseball official. And I'm not talking Little League. This time we just wrapped up all the youth leagues like Connie Mack, American Legion, Elite Ball. Now we're into the adult ball, Puget Sound Senior Baseball League, Redmond Adult League, etc. So before I move ahead here, I want to show you, we're going to have two of these NOAA weather radios as a prize tonight. And I'll have two questions when we wrap things up. And what you will do if you are online, you're going to put your answer in the chat box. And Jeff is going to be our referee. You have a whistle there, Jeff? I'm just kidding. But we'll get him some pinstripes to work with as well here in just a bit. And now for those of you in the room, I'm going to have to lean on Lynn or somebody else there to who raised their hand and got the right answer. So the first person to get the right answer with question number 1, you're going to win one of these Midland weather radios. They will be shipped to you directly. So I'll need a name and a mailing address. And then we'll go to question number 2. Everybody but the winner of question number 1 will be able to have an opportunity to win the second Midland Weather Radio. So this is a fun night. I like to share knowledge as much as possible, and I was asked to talk about wildfires. What makes wildfires happen? What are the conditions that come together? Some of this slide deck here tonight I have used at the Seattle Mariners Weather Education Day. That's usually run with the folks at Como Television. I've worked with them now for about 15 years. So the three elements, the recipe for wildfires: number one, dry conditions. Number two, it's got to be pretty doggone warm. It's hard to start a fire when it's only 45 degrees. And finally, some kind of an ignition source. About 80% of all wildfires are human caused. We'll go into some of those details a little later on, but they are in some way, shape, or form are caused by humans. They tend to be somewhere near where people are. Okay, so highways or farmland, homes, things like that. Lightning, obviously, is another source. We've seen some of that here in just the last 48 hours across the Pacific Northwest. And lightning not only can hit where people are, but it can land in more remote locations, like deep inside a national forest, for instance. That's where your smoke jumpers and folks like that have to go in, clearly well away, very remote from where you and I tend to live. So I was asked to talk about National Weather Service fire weather products. Two key elements here, and I think you've heard these in the past, but let's go into the details for these. First of all, this is a fire weather watch. This is just like a flood or any other kind of weather watch. This is the get ready, get prepared stage. But for fire weather, this is when it alerts land management agencies, such as the Department of Natural Resources or your local fire districts, to the high potential for the development of red flag criteria, which I'll get into in just a moment, during the next 12 or maybe even as far away as 3 days in advance. And it can be issued for part or all of any fire weather zone. And if you want, I can show a map on that from the Weather Service Spokane fire weather page when we get into the question and answer segment. Now, a red flag warning. This is when we have a combination of weather and the fuels. So the grass, the shrubs, the trees, any of those kinds of things that are very vulnerable for any period of time from 3 hours or more, even including a 12-hour period or 2 days, whatever the case may be. Now, there's many different factors that can be involved in this process. Number one, and we've seen a lot of this already this season as well as previous seasons, strong winds. And there's the definition of the winds for you right there. Low relative humidity. These are the dry conditions, usually about 15% or lower. And this is particularly important when we get really hot weather and our dew points in the atmosphere are rather low. In other words, not much moisture in the atmosphere. Also, poor recovery overnight. So maybe that relative humidity, it may cool down at night, but boy, that air is still very, very dry. Another one, and we've seen this here of late, is the dry thunderstorms, particularly as we're coming out of an extended warm, dry period. That is when things are most vulnerable, and that's when you're going to see a red flag warning usually in place. And this one is probably the only real technical term I have for tonight, something called a Haynes Index. I want you to think about the fireplace in your home, for instance, and it gets a draft when you get that fire going and it's going up the chimney. That's what's going on in the atmosphere in a rather large scale situation here. So once the fire gets going, then that air is rising and it has lots of encouragement to keep on going, just like the draft in a fireplace. And that's what the high index of 5 or 6 for a Haynes Index, and can really help dominate the fire growth at that particular point. One other thing that you'll find in many National Weather Service offices, but particularly in the Western U.S., are folks who work in our local offices called incident meteorologists, or IMETs. They have a lot of local expertise. They know their turf. They're able to work outside of the office, out in the field. Their primary role is working with the incident management teams at the fire camp. They're providing those briefings. You may have seen some media interviews or seen some stories that kind of reflect the meteorologist standing up in front of all the fire group that is heading out to go fight the fire during the day shift or the night shift, and providing that information. Very well trained. They are well versed in the incident command system. If you know ICS, meteorologists tend to be in the planning section. This isn't just fire either. It can involve hazardous material response. For instance, in your area, you've got those Bakken oil trains rolling through there several times a day. What if you had a train derailment, a fire? That's where the incident meteorologist can be there with that incident management team and helping to address where's the plume going, those kinds of things. They've also gone through a lot of media training, television, radio, newsprint, web. They're very well versed in that and can work with the public information officers as a part of the incident management team in those kinds of episodes. And they got good resources. Nice rig, so in case the fire camp is out in the wilderness somewhere, they can get there just like everybody else. And if there isn't internet, they've got a laptop with a satellite dish, so you can be able to communicate and get weather data and information. And they also have with them local weather observation equipment where they can talk to the incident commander and say, where would you like this weather station to be set up as a part of our effort to monitor the situation? And they can go out on the fire lines, like you see this image here, where he's holding a Kestrel for a handheld weather instrument to get measurements on temperature, relative humidity, wind, and things like that. Pardon me, I thought I'd turn the phone down. Bear with me a moment. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, where to get fire weather products? First of all, I assume that you know your National Weather Service office there in Spokane. There's their web address. But the other offices that serve the state of Washington include Pendleton, Portland, and Seattle. And your Spokane office, by the way, carries over into much of the Idaho Panhandle and 2 counties over in western Montana as well. If you're curious on weather across the nation, you can go to weather.gov. Maybe there's a hurricane where you've got relatives down in the Gulf Coast or the Southeast, and they can, you can point your mouse in that direction and get to the local office and get more information there. I myself do that all the time because I'm looking to see if I can follow what's going on with the local Doppler weather radars in particular offices, particularly when severe weather is underway. Some other resources there include the Northwest Interagency Coordination Center. You see their web address listed there. They're down in Portland, Oregon, and their area of responsibility is for Oregon and Washington State. Of course, Washington State Department of Natural Resources, a lot of information there with regards to wildfires across the state, with ongoing fires as well. And finally, on a national scale, the National Interagency Fire Center down in Boise, Idaho, but they're a national resource, and they keep track and help with the resources to help fight fires across the nation, whether it's a type 1, 2, type 2 team or type 3 team, air resources, all kinds of things go through NIFC there. All right, this is where I put my chair of the SECC hat on. What happens when you have a fast-moving wildfire? Usually these are wind-driven. So your local jurisdiction, like Spokane County or Adams County, Pend Oreille County, Whitman County, whatever the case may be, they have the ability to activate the Emergency Alert System, or EAS. They should use the Fire Warning Event Code. That's the FRW you see there, again, by your local jurisdiction. How do you receive this? You can receive them on your NOAA Weather Radio, which we're going to hand out 2 of them tonight. And that is an all hazards warning system. So it's not just for fire or weather. There's 17 non-weather related event codes that the emergency alert system can be activated. And of course, you can receive your EAS messages from television and radio broadcasts as well as cable as well. Now on your smartphones, these are called wireless emergency alerts, or WEA. Again, they can activate, your local jurisdiction can activate both the emergency alert system and wireless emergency alerts at the same time. Very, very productive. You receive them on your smartphone if you are in the area where it is warned. Your cell phone towers, if they're in that warning area, act like little broadcast stations, and that's how you receive them through your smartphone. And you can learn more through the Washington State Public Alert and Warning System Plan at the website you see listed here through the Washington State Military Department, actually hosted by the Emergency Management Division there. We call it WAPAS. So what does fire warning mean? Well, it is really for these rapidly spreading wildfires or structure fire. Sometimes you can have fires in a neighborhood where the homes are really close together and the wind's blowing, and it can go from one structure to the next to the next. You might remember the Spokane fire probably about 25 years ago that had something similar to that. And your local jurisdictions probably are going to ask you to get out of Dodge as quickly as possible to get out of harm's way. And the source here for this and all the other EAS and WEA event codes is available on the WAPAS website under tab Bravo 7. Another hazard with wildfires is smoke. Boy, have we had our share of it here lately. Obviously producing very poor air quality for those who are sensitive to these kinds of things, where you get into the unhealthy category. It's just nasty. And the sources can be from your local fires somewhere in your vicinity, or they can be distant. You might remember in 2017, we had all those wildfires in British Columbia, got northerly winds, and it spread that wildfire smoke all across the Pacific Northwest on both sides of the Cascades. So some things that you can do. I mentioned ignition sources. Well, this is where you can't have a fire if you don't have an ignition source. It's the third leg of your three-legged stool here. So to avoid those fire starts, fireworks, unfortunately, we have kids that play with them around throughout the year, I should say. Some people do outdoor or yard debris burns, and the embers get caught up in the air and fly away and start spot fires downstream. Campfires that are not properly dosed, and so that they become cold before anybody leaves. Burning materials out of your car. Maybe it's your tow chain for your boat or trailer or whatever the case may be. If it's dragging on the pavement, shooting sparks, that can also be a source of fire starts. And what can you do around your home or your business? A nice website here called firewise.org, and it can help you build what's called defensible space around your property. I can remember a fire in Wenatchee probably about 3 years ago now. It was early in the fire season, and they had a fire race up the hill, much like you would see down on 195 in the Hangman Valley there. When I play that golf course, I look up and I go, those homes are, I hope they build defensible space up there because they're vulnerable. But in that Wenatchee example, the entire set of homes along the ridge were burned except for just one. And that one had built really good defensible space, and their home was saved. That's what that is all about. All right, so what's it look like for the rest of this summer and on into early fall? What you see here are the temperature and precipitational seasonal outlooks from the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center. So on the left, and I want you to think of this as 3 piles of poker chips. We've got 100 of them. So in the case of temperature, increased odds, more poker chips in the warmer than average category than near average or below average for temperature. Doesn't mean those two other categories can't occur, but when you look at the entire 3-month period here from August through October, you've got greater odds on warmer than average temperatures. On the precipitation side, you see the letters EC there. That means equal chances. Take those poker chips and you got 33 of them in each pile. No real trend with regards to warm or drier or wetter with regards to precipitation during this 3-month period. So your takeaways here, I think it's pretty obvious. Wildfire season is here. Keep your head on a swivel, always being alert, particularly when we have hot and really dry conditions. And let's do what we can to avoid those ignition sources. Some of these, as I've mentioned, keeping burning materials, those cigarettes, cigars in the vehicle. Don't toss them out the window. They get caught up in the grass, the dry grass along the side of the road. And then the next car comes by and the wind blows and off it goes. Tighten up those towing chains. And particularly when we've had lightning, if you see smoke, call 911 right away, because that allows the fire response teams to get on it before it gets too far out of control. And we're all in amateur radio. So what's our role in all of this? Well, you work with your local jurisdiction, contribute to their emergency communications, whether it's in the EOC or ECC, depending on the case, or they may ask you to be deployed out into the field, or you can report things even from home for that matter. So just contributing to the overall, keeping an eye on the situation and providing additional communication during episodes like this. So that is the recipe for Wildfire. There's my name and my call sign. You've got my Twitter handle there, as well as the everettpost.com, where you'll find the weather minutes, etc. And as always, keep in mind, when you are weather aware, you are weather prepared. I am ready for any questions that you may have.
It's interesting to me. I live out in a fire area that we have fires around us every year. And I keep the front of my property weed eated down low. But almost every week when I weed eat, I'm just amazed at the number of cigarettes I'm finding. And I go, come on. Don't you realize one of those is going to burn this whole area down?
Well, you would think. And that's something, I work with the media now, and it's a message I've put out in my Weather Minute podcast. I've done a news story on it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, roughly 9 months of the year, it's raining, everything's moist, not a problem, although it is littering. But by state law, the RCW, that's over $1,000 fine for tossing those things out. And when you talk to the litter patrol chair for the state of Washington, they absolutely hate those things because they're so small, so finite, and it's really tough to pick them up, and they do not decompose very well either. So it depends on the brand and what kind it is, but still, they just don't decompose very well. So that's something that maybe Spokane Emergency Management or the city of Spokane Emergency Management, you could have Sarah over there. They can work with local media and just get that word out there. Repeat it over and over and over again, because it is clearly not only a litter problem, but clearly can become a wildfire issue.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
So yeah, I got one.
Oh, go ahead.
Uh-oh. Scott,
now we got competition.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
Scott,
do.
go ahead.
It's more of a statement. You said that you have to put that like bubble around your house, so a no burn zone around your house. I heard, I don't know if this is true, urban legend or how that goes. The fish is this big. Somebody put a sprinkler on top of their house, and they put the water on real fast and furious, and they coated everything with water. How does that for a prevention against fire from intruding into your space and burning your house down?
A good question. There are people that put sprinklers on top of their homes. Just keep in mind, if it is a fast-moving, rapidly spreading wildfire, you also need that defensible space. The lawn is mowed down pretty low. It's green. Your shrubs are green. No firewood next to the house. You see where I'm going with this. That heat from the fire can easily evaporate that sprinkler's water. Plus, you're running off a hose. The fire is a lot bigger than a garden hose. So it is a component of the fight, but your defensible space is actually built long before the wildfire ever arrives. I myself, I clean my gutters out twice a year because I live among trees here. And we've had several really significant warm, dry years. This year is an exception because of our cool, wet spring. But we've had some years like 2015. Man, somebody threw something into the green area next to me, I would have been in trouble. So I'm cleaning the gutters. I'm trimming up the limbs on my trees well above where I can reach it. Everything is cleared. I don't have any firewood or anything like that around. I really try to minimize the issue as much as possible. I have very little yard per se, green grass that is. A lot of it's rock or concrete or something along those lines. So I don't have much to burn other than I can't do anything about what's right next door to me where all the trees and other vegetation resides. So the key here is building that defensible space before the wildfire ever gets started.
Can you tell us what started Firestorm years ago? I know the answer, but I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think I told Lynn the story the other day, and if my memory is correct, and I think that was 1991, if my memory serves me right. It was a windy day. It was very dry. It was in the month of October, and a dragonfly got caught in an electric fence, got fried, shot off sparks, went into the grass downstream from the wind, got caught in the grass, and the wind and the sparks, it took off. And that was how that particular fire, how did they know that? Because the investigators followed where the source of the fire was. It came back to that electric fence, and that dragonfly was still stuck in the fence, obviously fried to a crisp. But that was, they looked at it and just shook their heads and go, you got to be kidding me. That's how it happened. I also understand in that same fire, we had some power lines that were rubbing against tree limbs and things like that. That contributed to that fire. And we saw that with the Malden fire just a couple of years ago down there. I think that's in Whitman County. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that practically burned down that entire town. Again, that was power line issue. We've seen that with PG&E down in California. The Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa, or the Paradise fire that killed 85 people a few years ago. So it's a tough issue with the power industry. People talk about burying lines, but I'll tell you, that's 10-15% more costly to bury lines, and it's tough to do it outside of urban areas where things are much more rural. So those are some of the challenges we have to deal with. And again, the power companies, I know around here, they're trimming trees every summer season, not only for the winter season, but also for the summertime dry periods as well. Thank you.
Ted, this is Bob.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, so I want to make sure. Fire-wise, you mentioned that, and you talked about defensible space. In our training here in Spokane, I think maybe some of us old timers, will remember that it's 30 feet. Basically, it's kind of a 30 feet break between fuel of any kind in the home. And this enters in what you're talking about with having green lawns, shrubs, things like that that are green and stuff. And I drive around the town. My business is this, amongst other things. I'm an insurance inspector, and I inspect commercial properties. And you cannot imagine how many recommendations I make every month to businesses that have 5 or 6 foot tall dry grasses, dead shrubs, trees with limbs hanging on the roof, with pine cones that you could break open and eat, because many parts are edible. So this is something to remember. It's more than 30 feet. It is the trees. It's anything that's combustible, and they call them ladder fuels. I haven't heard.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I haven't heard that term mentioned tonight. It starts down here and it climbs the ladder up and it takes on from there. And
Well,
so
that's why you heard me mention trimming the limbs up beyond where I
Yes.
can reach.
yes,
Because you're absolutely right. That's how they climb into the canopies, and from there, especially
Mhm.
with the wind blowing, boy, they can take off real easy at that point. You
Oh,
might
yeah.
remember they were trying to save the sequoias down near Yosemite, and their big effort there was to ensure that everything stayed on the ground. It did not get elevated into those tall ancient trees. So the same type of concept, absolutely. And I can imagine in your industry, insurance, oh my goodness, like you said, you probably repeat that so many times, you can probably put on a tape recorder and do it. Do these people want their places to burn down? I mean, that's what they're asking for. They're asking for trouble.
They don't want them to burn down unless, well, I think I can think of one that may have never did. But they just don't know. You know, and there's a lot of things that go into that. Ignorance, willful or accidental. And we had quite a campaign on TV here 10, 12 years ago about this. We had training in Aries races in ACS about Firewise and that kind of thing. And so it needs to continue on. Those funds need to be returned to that kind of training. I have a book of recommendations that I have to copy and paste into forms. And I just decided to make one for the in the Northwest. And nobody has said a word about it. They've accepted it. And I've gone back like 2 years later and inspected the place, and sure enough, that tree is gone. And the grass is mowed, even behind the shop where the goats eat. You know, not kidding. A goat, you know, he brought goats out there to do this, you know, out way up there in the mountains of Panhandle up there. So that's all I have. I just wanted to say that one thing. And we kind of stay close to the radio tonight because we've got a lot of stuff going on in this area here. So.
Oh, yeah. I will say I was the warning coordination meteorologist for National Weather Service Seattle starting in the spring of 1994. And starting in early summer 1995, myself and one of our incident meteorologists, we made arrangements with other subject matter experts for wildfire. So U.S. Forest Service, DNR, local fire chiefs, anybody. We created what we called a fire weather media tour. So what that means is that we got a group of us, about 5 in all, in one vehicle. We made arrangements to visit every news-oriented station and paper in the Seattle area. So we hit all 4 TV stations. At that time, we had Northwest Cable News as well. We hit the Seattle Times, and we hit 4 radio stations. 2 were National Public Radio stations. The other 2 were Cairo and Como in those days. We did it every year right around July 1st. So not only did we hit what's the latest for the wildfire season and what's new, and you know, the news crews need to be certified before they can go out and cover these stories. So we would address that. We also addressed fireworks safety and things like that because we're heading into the 4th of July. Working with your local warning coordination meteorologist, I would recommend that. I'll tell you, your broadcasters are going to love it. And it's all done in one day. We would spend 45 minutes at each location, 15 minutes to get in the car, drive to the next spot, park, and go in and do it all over again. We would start at 8 o'clock in the morning and we were done by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And it provides a consistent message to all the news organizations in one day. It was very, very effective. We later did it for flood. We did a flood media tour, and one of my nicknames is Tsunami Ted, so we did it with tsunami stuff on occasion as well. So, and I'll tell you, you get to know your area media. They know who to come to when there are issues, things arise. It's just a good relationship building effort, and it helps get that message out to the community as a whole. Yes, you're going to have people that, I'm just going to use the phrase, irresponsible, or they have the mentality, well, that won't happen to me. And those are the ones that you're in the insurance industry, you know, they're just asking for trouble. At some point, that their number is going to come up. So appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
So Ted, I got a couple of comments and questions. First of all, I just spent $6,000 on fire mitigation, having my ladder fuel reduced by taking the trees up to about 20 feet. Some of them are it's probably going to cost me 3 times that to finish it off. But so I'm preparing.
How many trees do you live among?
I'm on 11.67 acres, and
enough said.
I have trees on 2 sides of me, so a lot of them. The question I have is, you know, how does one get this information if there's no internet or no cell service? Because one of the first things that goes down in you know, in a major firestorm is going to be cell towers.
Good question, and I'm glad you brought it up, and that brings back these. These operate on batteries as well. So, and there's even some that are crank radios. There's different kinds of models. This particular one from Midland operates on AC power, but also battery backup. So if the broadcasters and the National Weather Service are doing their thing, because over at on Rambo Road there at NWS Spokane, they've got backup generators too. So they're still on the air. By the way, the weather radio transmitters up like on Mount Spokane, they've got backup generators as well. So all the way around, you've got this redundancy to keep everything functioning. So hopefully that is, you know, provides you not 100% reliability, but doggone close to it. So that's another reason to have these weather radios, because they will operate even with the power and communications like internet and phone systems, cell phone towers. By the way, you lose power, those cell phone towers, they might have 40 minutes worth of battery backup. After that, they're dead in the water. That means no phone calls, no texting. You see what I'm saying here. So again, this is another communication tool in the toolbox. Your other question?
Well, it's another comment. I just got a notification from the sheriff's office that there's down power lines and trees in Rockford. So we probably just need to stand by for a possible fire situation down there.
Yeah, it's that time of year, isn't it?
Yep.
If anything happens, there will be a weather net tonight. Right now, there's no need for one. Everything is far to our east. But we're going to be monitoring this, and we may get up yawning and be in here in our pajamas, but there'll be a weather net tonight. WS70, clear.
Okay. Thank you for that update. Appreciate that. Are there any other questions, or is it time to go to our prize questions at this point? I see Lynn looking across the room.
Sounds like it's time for the questions, Ted.
All right. Are we ready? And is our referee ready to go?
Yeah, I just got to wait and see who's going to slip me the $10 bill.
Wait a minute. Put another 0 on that. Let's make that a C note while we're at it, okay?
I'm cheap. I'm cheap.
All right. You're a cheap date. All right. Here's our first question. Wildfires. Name the 3 ingredients. And you see 6 of them listed here. And this is where we play the Jeopardy music.
I think Frank was the first one to put his hand up there. Oh, wait, Harold's on chat.
All right, which one was first? And first of all, we have to find out whether they have the right answer.
Yeah, so let's start with I think it was Frank. Well, Frank and Rich. Rich was just behind Frank. Go ahead,
Okay.
Frank.
All right, you need dry conditions, heat, and ignition source.
Very good. There's your answer. Absolutely. That's your wildfire recipe right there. Nice job, Frank. Again, I'm going to need your name and address, your mailing address, so we can ship you one of these Midland weather radios. You're now ineligible for the next one, Frank. So everybody get ready for the next question. Here we go.
And as near as I could tell, Frank just beat Harold. Harold got the answers right as well.
Okay, so
Congratulations, Harold.
for wildfire weather, what are the 3 elements that are needed? Again, we're playing the Jeopardy music.
Rich has got his hand up, so
Yep.
I think anyway.
Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, there's temperature, wind, and moisture.
Ding, 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 ding. Very good. Nice job. Again, Rich, we'll need your name and your mailing address. Lynn or Jeff, you can send me their information in email. I will get that to my contact in Kansas City, and you can expect those to be shipped out, probably sometime next week at this point. We'll see how well the Pony Express does. So again, congratulations. These are Midland weather radios, and look for those coming to you in the mail in the near future. Is there anything else I can do for you tonight?
And I have to say, Harold again was just right behind Rich that time and got everything right.
Those two winners, they owe him a beer. Okay, that's all I can say. So
yeah, they do.
Hey, it's been a pleasure tonight. Thank you for playing along and also paying attention. I hope you learned quite a bit here tonight, and it's been fun sharing the information with you. Again, I'm available at Tornado Ted 6 and everettpost.com. You'll hear me on air again on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning at krko.com. Everett's greatest hits.
Well, thanks very much, Ted. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. I know I certainly did. So again, thank you and have a great evening.
All right, you too. Stay safe. Absolutely. Do whatever you can to stay safe. Thank you for the opportunity. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Very informative.